Welcome, my dear guys and gals, to the discussion of how Himeko went from mid to meta. I'm your host, Likimish, and let's get started with the discussion. We are back at it again with Hanakai Star Rail, my favorite game besides Monster Hunter. But before this video could get properly started, I must state something that is pretty important. It's supposed to be, well, this video was supposed to be the Helldivers 2 mech video, but that video ran into some, let's just say, complications. So we're going to do a little bit of a shorter video where a character who is constantly C tier, D tier, E tier, heck, some people put her at the bottom of the charts, all of a sudden rise up and became a character that started clearing endgame content and used in various of teams. Before we can talk about Himeko's rise to power, we must first talk about Himeko's kit. When it comes to Himeko's kit, it really does seem like she's just a basic Year Edition unit with not much of the fancier tools that newer units have gotten later on, but there is nuance into her kit and we're going to get into that. First is her basic attack. It targets one single enemy and it scales off of attack. Basically the normal attack that nearly every other character have besides a few exceptions. Then you have her skill. Her skill is a blast attack that also scales off of attack. Now, there is a difference between Blast and AoE. Blast targets a single enemy with two adjacent enemies, and those two adjacent enemies take reduced damage, while AoE targets all enemies on the field. And then there's Himeko's ultimate, which is just a basic AoE ultimate. It does AoE and it scales off of attack. And then we have her technique, and her technique kind of sucks. All it does is that it creates a dimension, and the thing about dimensions is that you can only deploy one at a time, and her effect only gives you increased fire damage for 2 turns, while other people's dimensions can provide way more value. And then you have her bonus traces, and her bonus traces, 2 are kind of meh, while 1 is really good. First is her attacks can sometimes apply burn, but honestly the scaling is so low that it really doesn't matter. She's not going to be doing any DOT anytime soon. And then we have another one where she does more damage to enemies when it comes to her skill and they are burning, which is alright, that's okay. But the thing that is actually good is the top one and the final one you get right here, which increases your crit rate based on having 80% health or above. Now that is really good. Now you may notice that I've skipped over something, and that was her talent. That's because her talent is the whole thing she is centered around. This is what makes Himeko basically Himeko. Himeko's talent is a follow-up attack that is an AoE attack that scales off of attack. How this follow-up attack works is that you gain charges up to 3, and after 3 charges it releases an attack. How these charges are gained is through breaking the enemy's weakness bar. After you break the bar, you'll gain 1 charge stack. And Himeko does not need to be the one only breaking the bar. Other teammates can break the bar to accumulate stacks for Himeko. Now the only thing that makes a difference is that when it comes to elite enemies, they do not need to have their bar broken multiple times to gain charges. Whenever an elite enemy's bar is broken or a boss's bar is broken, she will instantly gain 3 charges. Now her charges cannot overstack like Shui, for example, or Jade. So you always have to keep that in mind when it comes to her character. Now people may wonder, what's with the all of a sudden rise? Because her kit has not been changed since 1.0. So how come all of a sudden she's good now? Well, there are 3 factors, and one of those factors is the state of the game. Here we are with the game state explanation. So 1.0 and a few versions later on was mainly a single target focused meta. Basically, what that meant is that you had a big, scary elite or boss enemy that you had to just single target and kill it. Now, occasionally it'll spawn like a little jabber, but then, especially characters with Celia at the time, she could just kill the jabber, kill the other jabber, and then probably do an ult to get another turn or whatever the crap that she does with her stupid scythe spinning around, and go back to just attacking the boss enemy. Which means that your addition characters didn't really have a place. And then you had MLC, which is your end game content, and that's also single target based. So your addition characters were not doing well at all unless you were Jin Yuan, because Jin Yuan, he could actually do some single target damage. And I would say things have changed around Pure Fiction, because Pure Fiction was an end game content mode, which you could probably guess is a crowd-paced focus mode, which means that your addition characters all of a sudden had a place to shine because it's all about clearing crowds. And then you start getting events, and a lot of these events are crowd clearers, right? You have to clear these crowds, you have to clear these crowds to reach the boss enemy. Like, they started integrating more and more crowds and more trash when in combination with the bosses that helped diversify the roster. Heck, you could even see this when you look at the Echo of War bosses, right? Because first you had the dragon. The dragon wasn't really crowd control. Then you had Cocolia. Cocolia didn't really need crowd control. But then you started getting stuff like Fentilia, which you had to kill those flowers. So you needed a little bit more crowd control. But then the Swarm boss came, and dear God, you needed crowd control for him. Because if you don't kill those bugs, you're dead. You're just dead. And then you've gotten one of the more recent bosses, which is Sunday, and he's all about crowd control. I forgot to say something that would help Himeko's case and why she is starting to be picked a lot more. The Doomsday Beast, Cocolia, and Sunday are all Fire Weak. While Sunday specifically requires Weakness Break, that is in order to get the shield for the fight and to also cancel his angels. And Himeko is really good at that as well. I just wanted to state that before I continue. And then finally, another endgame mode released, and this is where Himeko really started to shine. And that is Apocalyptic Shadow. And it's an endgame weakness breaking based mode. And I wonder, who's good at weakness breaking? So basically, the game started to evolve and started to include more trash enemies, more crowds, so that now the demand for your addition characters are just ever increasing. And with a lot of these events, and especially Apocalyptic Shadow, where it's a lot of weakness breaking based, that's where Himeko really starts to shine, because she's based around weakness break. And now we have the second factor, which is gear. When it comes to gear in the beginning of Star Rail's lifetime, you were pretty limited, especially when it came to Himeko. The only gear that people really used on Himeko was the Cowboy set or the Fire set, and even a mixture of the two sometimes. But as the game progressed, we've gotten more and more gear sets, but I'm going to skip over all of those and go to the one that actually matters. The Grand Duke set. With this set released, people went absolutely crazy. Anyone with a follow-up attack got instantly boosted because this set was specifically tailored towards them. Let's get into that. So first, it's the two-piece effect, which increases the damage dealt by follow-up attacks by 20%. Absolutely amazing. It's basically in the name. More damage for your follow-ups. But the 4-piece is where it really gets interesting. When the wearer uses follow-up attacks, increase the wearer's attack by 6% for every time the follow-up attack deals damage. This effect can stack up to 8 times and lasts for 3 turns. This effect is removed the next time the wearer uses a follow-up attack. Now, we're going to focus on the part of every time the follow-up attack does damage. What this means is that this scales not off of the follow-up attack itself, but how many times it hit. And if we look at Himeko's attack, it is a multi-hitting attack. And if you just crunch some simple numbers down, as long as there are 2 enemies on the field, she will always get the full buff of the armor set. Always. And what this all means, my dear guys and gals, is that Himeko will have a consistent attack buff of 56%. Over half of her total attack consistently buffed as long as there are 2 or more enemies on the field, which completely plays into a role as a addition. And then we get into the ornaments, orbs, or what I personally like to call them, orbees. And usually people run the inert salcedo, which basically increases your crit rate, and when your crit rate is above a certain threshold, you'll get increased follow-up attack damage. And that's what most people used for the longest time, until more and more orbees got added. And there are so many orbees that you could use with this character that released. We have the Rulant Arena, the Land of Dreams, Glamoth, Divine Realm, Sigonia, and finally there is also Forge. All these orbees you could just use with Himeko for very good effect, but so far the one that I've been personally running is Duran, Dynasty of the Running Wolves, and this one I'll read to you real quick. So, when allies use follow-up attacks, the wearer gains 1 stack of merit. Stack it up to 5 times. Each stack of merit increases the damage dealt by the wearer's follow-up attack by 5%. When there are 5 stacks, additionally increases the wearer's crit damage by 25%. Now, unfortunately, it's not like Duke, where it was each damage of instance done. This is based on how many times you do the follow-up attack, but still, that is a nice 25% at max stacks damage increase, with also a 25% crit damage, which also pairs, by the way, with her trace, to where as long as she has high health, she'll gain an extra 15% crit rate. So now we get into light cones, or as I personally call them, cards. Now, many of cards have been added, and a lot of them you can use with Himeko, but I'm going to focus on her main character card, and that's just because, well, it's her character card, so of course it's going to synergize the best with her. I only believe there is one other card that is above her card, and I just don't have it up on the top of my head in terms of total DPS that it can do. But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to focus on her card. And this also factors into the fact of the game being going on for longer, which means that people had more opportunities to get her card, whether it's through the gacha or buying it directly from the Starlight Exchange. So, when it comes to Himeko's card, for every enemy on the field, increases the wearer's attack by 9%, up to 5 stacks. When the enemy is affected with weakness break, the damage dealt by the wearer increases by 30% for 1 turn. Do I even need to explain to you why this is good? So that means that doing her role of a year addition, more enemies on the field means more damage. And there's also the fact that whenever your team does a weakness break, because I need to make it clear that Himeko does not need to be the one weakness breaking to get the buff, kind of like her drone. Her team can do it and she'll also get the buff. And that means that even when it's not her turn, 30% damage increase. Absolutely amazing. Now we're on our final reason for Himeko's rise, which is the character lineup. So when it came to 1.0, there wasn't that many characters in the game. So that the meta characters just really dug in and just really became meta for a while, and Himeko just had no place to go. Then certain characters started to get added, which just increased Himeko's relevance. First was Silverwolf. What Silverwolf does is that Silverwolf makes an enemy weak to whatever weakness is on your enemy's team. Now, it is random, so sometimes she can do quantum, she can do fire, right? But as long as your team was like 2 fire, 2 quantum, you don't have to worry about her picking something like physical or imaginary. It's only what your team has. So that means that you can help get around a non-fire unit and still being able to weakness break to have Himeko shine. And then a character like Rune Mei came out. And now when it came to Rune Mei basically helps you do more weakness breaking. She increases your weakness break efficiency, she increases your weakness break damage, which is all in all pretty good for a character like Himeko, who is based around weakness break. And then you have a character like Shui, a 4-star, which every time you attack a weakness bar, she gains stacks to a follow-up attack, and then uses her follow-up attack to damage enemies at random. Here we are with Editor Leakamish again, because I don't write scripts, and I forgot something insanely important when it came to Shui and why she's so good with Himeko. So when it comes to Shui and her follow-up attack, once you get a certain eidolon for her, she'll now ignore enemies' weakness. What that means is that Shui's a quantum, right? So if the unit's a fire, doesn't matter. She'll still attack the weakness, or her follow-up attack will. Imaginary, again, doesn't matter. Her quantum, she'll just go straight through it. She ignores their weakness. And her ult also does the same thing, just to a more significant degree. So that means that Shui can essentially just attack units without them even being weak to her, which is pretty nice. I don't know why I forgot about that. So now you're really starting to get units that's more and more based around weakness break. And then you get Gallagher, a 4-star healer who is a fire unit, kind of like Himeko, who also specializes in breaking the enemy's bar. He can, there's one thing that he can do, which is pretty cool, is that he can do a basic attack, do his ult, advance his action forward again, and now he has an enhanced basic attack, which does enhanced weakness break efficiency. So he could just demolish a unit if they had fire on their bar. So now for a while, my team mainly consisted of this, which was Gallagher, Himeko, and Shui, and then we had some random unit, some random support unit, whether it was Silver Wolf when there was no enemies that matches the weakness, or Ron May when there were enemies that matches the quantum and fire weakness. But then a certain character came out, and you might have heard of her.
Sprouted from the earth. It bloomed in the morning sun and whispered to me. Like fireflies to a flame, my biggest death. May we meet again in reality.
This character absolutely broke the game when she released. I am not joking. The stuff that tracks people's polls and stuff like that broke because people were pulling for her that much. Firefly completely changed the game when she released, and she is an overpowered character. Now, usually, I kind of try to stay away from the overpowered and used more weaker characters for the challenge. But the synergy that came with Firefly was too much to ignore, to the point where I got her E1. Now, what does she do? Well, let me summarize it for you because she does a lot of stuff, but basically, when she enters her enhanced state, she will attack enemies' bars, and no matter the weakness, she will decrease their bar. Whew. Damn, okay, that means Shui will just get stacks nonstop. Oh, gets even better. When she is in her enhanced attack, whoever she is attacking, or at least the main target of her attack, will gain fire weakness. So that means that it doesn't matter what character type you are, it doesn't matter what weakness type you are, Firefly will make you fire weak, which means then I could use Gallagher and his super high weakness break style. That means characters like Himeko will constantly do damage to the bar. That means Shui will constantly keep getting her stacks and constantly doing her follow-up attacks. Which means now you have a completely dominating weakness break based team. So you literally start seeing Firefly with Himeko everywhere. And there's also a few other characters like Boothill, because Boothill also doesn't need you to be weak to physical. He could just apply it onto you. And the more characters that keep on getting this special trait where they could just go around the enemy's weakness and apply their own weakness to weakness break them, the more Himeko becomes relevant, because Himeko is based on weakness break. So due to all of these characters being added and just the roster getting more fill, because I'm only discussing a few characters, there's been tons of characters that have been released, which means tons of new characters to fit into team comps, tons of new characters to help break that weakness bar, tons of new characters to put Himeko with as a nice supporting AoE unit. It's just as simple as that. This character has gotten so much stronger because they keep adding more characters that synergize with her, and there's been more characters in the game in general, which increases the flexibility between teams. And there you have it. That is how Himeko went from a mid character to a meta character. Hopefully you all have enjoyed. And as I always say, this has been your host, Ligamish, opening the discussion to the comments below. Taking a rest, working on the Helldivers 2 mech video, saying farewell to you all.